There is a reason some people can hurt you and act like nothing ever happened. It's not always because they're cruel or heartless, though that's how it feels. The truth lies deeper, beneath the surface of their awareness, in a place psychology calls the shadow. This is the part of a person that hides everything they cannot face: their guilt, their fear, their shame, their weakness. When someone refuses to look within, the shadow begins to run their life for them. And the more they deny it, the more power it gains. The shadow of denial is a strange thing. It convinces a person that they are good, that their actions are justified, that their behavior isn't harmful. It twists perception until they become blind to their own darkness. When they hurt someone, they don't truly see it, not because it didn't happen, but because their mind filters it out to protect the fragile image they hold of themselves. Admitting the truth would mean confronting the parts they've spent their entire lives trying to bury. This is why people can lie, betray, or manipulate, and then act as though the event never occurred. Their consciousness has disowned the action. Their ego has locked it away in the basement of their psyche. To keep that door closed, they must pretend nothing happened. It's not a performance, it's a survival mechanism. Denial is their armor against self-awareness. And while it protects their illusion, it destroys their relationships. When someone's shadow takes control, they begin to project. They see in others what they refuse to acknowledge in themselves. The one they hurt becomes the mirror, a reflection of everything they deny. Instead of facing that reflection, they attack it. They diminish your feelings, gaslight your memory, or shift the blame entirely. To them, this distortion feels safer than reality, because reality would demand accountability, and accountability would expose their inner chaos. So when you confront them, they may laugh, change the subject, or accuse you of overreacting. What you're witnessing isn't confidence. It's fear wearing the mask of indifference. Deep down, they sense the truth, but they cannot let it surface. Their denial has become their identity. If they were to admit the harm, their entire self-concept would collapse. They would have to feel the pain they caused, and most people simply aren't emotionally mature enough to face that weight. Denial feeds on repression. It thrives in those who equate vulnerability with weakness. For them, emotions are dangerous, introspection is unbearable, so they numb themselves with distraction, arrogance, or control. They replace awareness with avoidance, truth with justification. And because they never process their inner pain, it festers. Eventually, the energy of that suppressed emotion spills outward, often as cruelty, defensiveness, or indifference. The tragedy is that the person who lives in denial isn't truly free. They are trapped in a cycle of projection and avoidance. Every time they hurt someone and pretend nothing happened, they reinforce their own blindness. Every time they rewrite the story to avoid guilt, they distance themselves further from the truth. The shadow grows darker, heavier, more deceptive, and the longer they deny it, the harder it becomes to escape. But the one who suffers most in this dynamic is usually not the denier. It's the person they've hurt. You are left questioning your worth, your memory, your sanity. You replay the events, searching for logic in their behavior, but logic cannot exist where denial rules. Their refusal to acknowledge the truth does not mean the truth isn't real. It only means they are too disconnected to see it. In their world, there are no wounds, only justifications. They rewrite the narrative to maintain control. You're too sensitive. You misunderstood me. It wasn't that bad. These words aren't expressions of reality. They're mechanisms of defense. They keep the shadow hidden, even if it costs them connection, love, and authenticity. The shadow of denial is the most destructive when it's unconscious. When someone refuses to reflect, they become emotionally unreachable. No amount of reasoning can open eyes that choose not to see. Their silence, their avoidance, their false normalcy, it's not peace. It's paralysis. It's a soul frozen in fear of its own reflection. To understand this is to understand that their behavior was never really about you. You became the mirror that revealed the part of themselves they cannot face. And so they punish the mirror instead of meeting their own reflection. The shadow of denial is not an excuse for their actions, but it is an explanation. It shows that behind every act of indifference lies a person who has not yet developed the courage to look within. Their denial is not strength. It is avoidance masquerading as calm. Their ability to forget is not clarity. It is repression disguised as peace. Their detachment is not healing. It is fear pretending to be control. Emotional immaturity is not always loud or chaotic. Sometimes it hides behind charm, intelligence, or even calmness. But when life confronts such people with responsibility, when they're asked to face the consequences of their actions, their true emotional age is revealed. Accountability requires self-awareness, humility, and the ability to sit with discomfort. Emotional immaturity runs from all three. When someone hurts you and then acts like nothing happened, what you are witnessing is not confidence or peace. It's avoidance. They are not capable of holding the weight of guilt because guilt requires emotional depth. Taking responsibility would mean facing the fact that they caused pain. And for an immature psyche, that is unbearable. So instead of acknowledging what they did, they rewrite the story. They shift blame, minimize the harm, or pretend the event was insignificant. The immature mind sees everything through the lens of self-protection. To them, accountability feels like an attack on their identity. They interpret every confrontation as criticism, every correction as rejection. This is why apologies from emotionally immature people often sound hollow. I'm sorry you feel that way, instead of, I'm sorry for what I did. They apologize not to take responsibility, but to end discomfort. Their goal isn't repair, it's escape. Accountability, on the other hand, is an act of emotional maturity. It demands reflection. What part did I play? What truth am I avoiding? It requires vulnerability, the willingness to admit that one's choices caused pain. But an emotionally immature person is ruled by the ego, not the soul. The ego's only goal is to stay safe, to stay right, and to stay unexposed. To admit fault would mean exposing the cracks in their self-image, and that's something they'll do almost anything to avoid. This is why denial becomes their default. They convince themselves that their intentions were pure, that the problem lies with you, or that the issue has been exaggerated. It's not that they don't understand logic, it's that logic cannot penetrate emotional defensiveness. Their inner child, the part of them that never learned emotional regulation, takes over and insists, it's not my fault. People like this tend to live in a constant state of emotional survival. They fear vulnerability because it reminds them of times they felt powerless. Many learned early in life that admitting mistakes led to punishment, shame, or rejection. So as adults, they defend against accountability as if it were a threat to their existence. They use blame, shifting, gaslighting, and emotional withdrawal as shields. Each tactic helps them avoid the unbearable feeling of inadequacy. When they hurt you and you confront them, you're not just dealing with the adult in front of you, you're dealing with the frightened inner child behind them. That child doesn't know how to process guilt, it only knows how to hide from it. So when you say, "That hurt me," they hear, "You are bad," and they panic. Instead of introspection, they choose deflection. Instead of remorse, they choose resistance. The result is a cycle. They hurt, deny, detach, and then continue as if nothing happened. Their emotional immaturity keeps them stuck in perpetual adolescence. They want the freedom of adulthood without the responsibility that comes with it. They crave connection, but flee from the accountability that genuine connection requires. This is why relationships with such individuals often feel confusing. One moment they appear loving, attentive, and sincere. The next, they become defensive, cold, and dismissive. It's not that they don't care. It's that caring demands emotional effort they haven't yet developed. True empathy requires the ability to step outside one's ego and see another's pain without feeling personally attacked by it. Emotional immaturity can't do that. It interprets another person's hurt as an accusation rather than an invitation to understand. When people lack emotional maturity, they tend to operate from impulse rather than reflection. They react instead of respond. They justify instead of apologize. Their main goal is to preserve the illusion of being, the good one. They need to believe that their intentions outweigh their actions because that belief protects their fragile sense of self. And so they cling to it even at the cost of honesty, love, and growth. In contrast, accountability is not about guilt. It's about integrity. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. But this truth is inaccessible to someone emotionally underdeveloped. Their world is binary, right or wrong, winner or loser, safe or unsafe. There's no room for nuance or shared responsibility. So when confronted, they either lash out, shut down, or pretend nothing happened. All three are different faces of the same fear, the fear of not being enough. Emotional immaturity shields a person from shame, but it also prevents transformation. Without accountability, they remain trapped in a loop of repeated patterns, breaking hearts, burning bridges, and blaming everyone else for the ashes. They can't grow because growth requires self-honesty, and honesty threatens their illusion of control. So they maintain the lie that nothing happened, the lie that they're fine, the lie that the problem is always someone else. When someone hurts you and acts as though nothing happened, it's often not a lack of memory, but a lack of self-awareness. Beneath their behavior lies one of the most powerful defense mechanisms in human psychology: projection. Projection is the unconscious act of denying one's own flaws, emotions, or insecurities and attributing them to someone else. It is the mind's way of avoiding the unbearable truth about itself. People project not because they want to deceive others, but because they are trying to protect themselves from their own inner reality. At its core, projection is an act of psychological survival. The human mind is wired to maintain a consistent self-image, a sense of being good, right? Or innocent. When reality threatens that image, when we are confronted with something that contradicts who we believe we are, The ego steps in to defend itself. Instead of allowing us to feel guilt, shame, or inadequacy, it externalizes those emotions. It says, it's not me, it's you. That's why a person who lies constantly accuses others of being dishonest. The one who manipulates claims you are the one trying to control them. The one who abandons you insists you were the one who pushed them away. Projection is not random, it is precise. It transfers the parts of the self a person cannot tolerate onto the nearest emotional mirror, usually someone who triggers their hidden wounds. The closer you are to their truth, the more likely you become the target of their projection. This mechanism allows them to remain psychologically safe. When they hurt you and act indifferent, they aren't necessarily acting, they are repressing. They have convinced themselves that they are not the problem, that they are justified, or that your reaction is exaggerated. Their mind has rewritten the story to protect their fragile identity from collapse. This rewriting isn't conscious deceit. It's a defense against self-confrontation. Projection works like a psychological mirror that has been turned outward. Instead of seeing what exists within, a person sees their own traits reflected back through others. This is why conflicts with certain people feel surreal. You're being accused of things you haven't done, blamed for emotions that aren't yours, or treated like an enemy when all you did was hold up a mirror. They are not relating to you. They are wrestling with the part of themselves they've exiled. Imagine a person who has spent their life avoiding feelings of powerlessness. When you confront them about something painful, they might lash out, accuse you of trying to control them, or withdraw completely. What's happening internally is that your presence triggered the very emotion they cannot handle, the feeling of not being in control. To avoid that discomfort, they project it onto you. In their mind, you have become the controlling one, and they feel innocent again. Projection restores their sense of balance, even if it destroys the truth. This is why emotional maturity is rare. It requires the ability to look inward, to ask, what part of this is me? But projection keeps a person trapped in denial. It offers temporary relief from guilt at the cost of long-term growth. It maintains the illusion of righteousness, but it prevents transformation. Those who live through projection remain emotionally fragmented. They can't integrate their shadow because they keep throwing it at others. When someone is ruled by projection, relationships become distorted. They don't see you for who you are, they see you for what they can't face. Every disagreement becomes a battlefield where their insecurities fight for dominance. Every moment of vulnerability becomes a perceived threat, and every attempt to communicate truth becomes ammunition for their defense system. You can try to explain, reason, or show empathy, but as long as their ego is protecting itself through projection, they won't hear you. Because in their narrative, you are already guilty. The painful part is that projection often happens with people who once seemed genuine, loving, or kind. They may have connected with you deeply until something about that connection touched their buried pain. The closer you get to someone's unhealed parts, the more their mind resists your presence. You become both the trigger and the scapegoat. They project not because they hate you, but because your authenticity unsettles the illusions they live behind. In this way, projection serves as both a weapon and a shield. It attacks to defend. It distorts reality to preserve identity. The person using it does not realize that By protecting themselves from shame, they are also protecting themselves from growth. They never learn to sit with discomfort, so they remain controlled by it. Every time they accuse you falsely or dismiss your pain, they are momentarily freeing themselves from accountability, but strengthening the chains of their own denial. The tragedy of projection is that it blocks genuine connection. When someone projects, they are not relating to you. They are relating to their fantasy of you, their version of the world that keeps them safe. You could speak the truth with clarity, love, and compassion, and it would still be twisted into an attack because their perception is filtered through fear. They are defending not against you, but against themselves. If you've ever been in this dynamic, you know the emotional confusion it causes. You start questioning your sanity, wondering if you truly are what they claim. You feel unseen, unheard, and constantly misunderstood. But what's really happening is that you've become a screen for their projections. Their inability to face themselves forces you to carry emotions that were never yours to hold. You feel their guilt, their shame, their anger, all of it displaced onto you so they can remain untouched. Projection as protection may temporarily spare the person from pain, but it creates suffering everywhere else. It isolates them from authenticity, sabotages their relationships, and leaves a trail of emotional wreckage behind. Yet, in their perception, they are the victim, not the cause. This is the paradox of projection. It preserves the ego while destroying connection. The more a person depends on projection, the less contact they have with their own inner world. They become strangers to themselves, terrified of introspection, addicted to control. Their identity is built not on truth, but on defense. And because projection shields them from accountability, they continue the same patterns, hurting, denying, and pretending nothing happened, while believing they are the ones being wronged. Silence can heal, but it can also hide. In psychology, silence is not always peace. Sometimes it is protection. When someone hurts you and then acts as though nothing happened, their silence is not always a sign of calm or control. It is often a carefully constructed defense mechanism, a wall built between them and their own emotional reality. This kind of silence is not born from strength, but from fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of vulnerability, fear of what they might discover if they actually had to speak the truth aloud. Human beings use silence in many ways. There is the silence of wisdom, where words are unnecessary. There is the silence of reflection, where the mind is processing pain. But there is also the silence of avoidance, where communication is deliberately withheld to protect the ego. This is the silence of denial, the kind that follows betrayal, rejection, or cruelty, when a person pretends nothing happened and carries on as if everything is fine. It's not peace, it's paralysis. It's emotional flight disguised as composure. This silence serves a psychological purpose. When someone refuses to address the harm they've caused, it allows them to maintain control over the narrative. If they never speak about it, they never have to take responsibility for it. Their silence becomes their alibi. It tells the story they want to believe, that they are unbothered, innocent, or justified. By saying nothing, they deny everything. It's a way of erasing the past without ever confronting it. To understand this silence, you have to understand the human need to preserve self-image. Most people cannot tolerate the discomfort of guilt or shame. They will go to great lengths to avoid seeing themselves as the bad one. Silence is one of the easiest ways to achieve that. It allows the person to bypass accountability while maintaining the illusion of peace. It's a passive form of control. Instead of arguing, explaining, or apologizing, they retreat into stillness, forcing you to sit with the weight of unspoken truth. This dynamic can be deeply confusing for the one who's been hurt. You replay conversations in your mind, waiting for acknowledgement that never comes. You wonder if you're overreacting or if your pain even matters. That's what the silence is designed to do. It destabilizes you. It makes you question your reality while preserving theirs. When they ignore your hurt, they are not moving on. They are protecting themselves from exposure. To speak would mean to face the truth, and they have spent their whole life avoiding that mirror. The silence they use is not absence. It is a form of communication. Every unspoken word sends a message. I refuse to validate your experience. Your pain doesn't exist to me. If I stay quiet, I stay in control. This silence punishes you for seeking truth. It tells you that your emotions are inconvenient, that your perception is flawed. It shifts the power dynamic. You become the one waiting, the one seeking resolution, while they maintain emotional dominance through detachment. Many people mistake this silence for maturity. They assume that those who say nothing are calm, wise, or above conflict. But silence used as avoidance is not maturity. It's emotional immaturity wearing a mask. It's the inability to hold space for discomfort, the fear of vulnerability disguised as indifference. It's the ego refusing to surrender its image, even at the expense of connection. The silent person believes that if they never acknowledge the issue, it will dissolve on its own. But the truth doesn't vanish in silence, it grows heavier. This form of silence often begins as self-protection. A person learns early in life that speaking about emotions leads to pain, that vulnerability invites rejection or punishment. So they shut down, repress, and retreat. Over time, this becomes their default defense. Instead of communicating, they disappear. Instead of apologizing, they distance. And instead of healing, they harden. To them, silence feels safe because it eliminates the risk of exposure. But in avoiding discomfort, they also avoid intimacy. When they hurt you and then go silent, they are not seeking resolution. They are seeking escape. Silence allows them to live in denial, to convince themselves that nothing happened. It helps them maintain their illusion of being right. If they never talk about it, they never have to feel remorse. Their quiet is their shield, a barrier between their ego and the consequences of their actions. But beneath that silence often lies emotional chaos. The things they refuse to say don't disappear. They sink deeper into the subconscious, building pressure over time. Every word unspoken becomes another brick in the wall that isolates them from themselves. They live disconnected, numbing the very emotions that could lead them to self-awareness. The silence they think protects them is actually what imprisons them, yet they cling to it, because to break it would mean facing what they've spent years denying. For the one on the receiving end, this silence feels cruel. It feels like being erased. You want to scream, to demand acknowledgement, but you're met with blankness. Their refusal to engage forces you to carry both sides of the conversation, the pain and the meaning of it. You start interpreting their silence as indifference, but it's deeper than that. It's fear wrapped in pride. It's emotional avoidance wearing the mask of detachment. The psychology of silence as a defense mechanism reveals how fragile the human ego truly is. It shows how far people will go to protect themselves from discomfort, even if it means abandoning truth. They silence themselves not because they are strong, but because they cannot regulate the storm inside them. Words would make their actions real, and reality would demand accountability. So they choose quiet, a quiet that denies, suppresses, and controls. Silence becomes their language of survival. It's how they avoid shame, how they control perception, and how they distance themselves from guilt. But in doing so, they lose connection, not only with others, but with their own humanity. Their silence is not the absence of words, it is the refusal to feel. It is the invisible armor of those who cannot bear the sound of their own truth. There comes a point in every journey of self-awareness when you realize that the people who hurt you may never become the people you hoped they would. You may have loved them deeply, forgiven them endlessly, and waited for them to understand what they did. But your healing will never be their redemption. You cannot save someone from the lessons they refuse to learn. You cannot transform someone who is committed to denial. Healing belongs to you, and redemption belongs to them. And the two are not the same. Many people mistake forgiveness for reconciliation. They believe that healing themselves will somehow change the one who caused the pain. They think that if they rise, the other will awaken too. But healing doesn't guarantee awareness in others, it only guarantees liberation for you. The person who wounded you may still live in denial, still rewrite the story, still act as if nothing happened. Their inability to evolve doesn't mean your healing failed. It means their journey hasn't begun. When you start healing, you begin to see reality clearly. You recognize that their silence, manipulation, or avoidance was never about you. It was about their inability to face themselves. But the human heart, especially one that feels deeply, often wants to make sense of the hurt. It wants to fix what broke, not just within itself, but within the other person too. You want to believe that your compassion will awaken theirs, that your growth will inspire their remorse. Yet some people don't change when you heal. They simply lose access to the version of you that tolerated their behavior. Healing doesn't rewrite the past, it redefines your relationship to it. It's not about erasing what happened, but about removing the power it once held over you. When you heal, you stop needing them to admit what they did because you finally understand it wasn't about your worth. But many people confuse this with redemption, as if your peace somehow redeems their actions. It doesn't. Your peace is not proof that they were right. It's proof that you refused to let their wrongness define you. The one who hurt you may watch your transformation and feel no guilt. They may still believe they were justified. They may even reinterpret your strength as evidence that what they did wasn't that bad. That's the paradox of healing. The more you grow, the less they see the damage they caused. They mistake your resilience for absolution. They assume that your ability to move on erases the accountability they never took. But healing doesn't erase history, it just stops it from ruling your present. You can't heal and redeem them at the same time, because redemption requires self-awareness, and that's something only they can choose. You can forgive someone 1,000 times, but if they never face their own reflection, nothing changes. Some people would rather live with the illusion of innocence then face the reality of what they've done. They use your forgiveness as a shield, not as a lesson. They see your calm as closure, your boundaries as rejection, your silence as proof that they were right all along. That's why it's important to understand the separation between healing and saving. Healing is internal. It's an act of reclaiming your power. Saving, on the other hand, is external. It's the desire to bring someone else out of their darkness. But no matter how much light you carry, it cannot penetrate a mind that chooses blindness. Your healing might illuminate the path, but they still have to walk it. You cannot drag them toward growth without being pulled back into their denial. There is also a subtle trap in believing that if you become enough, kind enough, wise enough, forgiving enough, they will finally change. That belief keeps you tied to their unhealed story. It turns your healing into a transaction. If I heal, maybe they'll come back different. But growth isn't a negotiation. You're not healing to be understood. You're healing to be free. If they ever awaken, it will not be because you fixed them. It will be because life eventually forced them to face what they once refused to see. Your healing doesn't rewrite their conscience, and it doesn't erase their karma. Every person must meet their own shadow in their own time. You can love them from afar, wish them well, even understand their pain, but you cannot redeem them through your growth. Their lessons belong to them, just as yours belong to you. Healing doesn't mean rewriting their story. It means finally stepping out of it. Your transformation might expose their avoidance, but it is not your job to guide them through it. You were never meant to be their mirror forever. You were meant to become your own